name I pray. Amen. Like I said, I don't really have a lesson. I had a huge project going on, probably the biggest project of the year at work going on this week. I was working kind of crazy hours, and I remembered I had a Sunday school lesson yesterday, and I thought I was going to have off all day because Josh was going to work for me, and then he called me and said he was sick, so I had, yeah. So I ended up going in to helping out there. And I thought I could still work on it at work, and then I ended up having a lot to do, and I was running around. They ran out of nuts. Tom goes to the hardware store. He's like, I'll take care of buying all the hardware you need. He buys 2 bags of bolts and 1 bag of nuts, and he thought it would be enough, and they ran out of nuts. They needed like 637 nuts.
How hungry were they?
Well, I'm glad you went there.
Dad jokes already started.
I'm like, why would you buy 2 bags of bolts and only 1 bag of nuts? But you actually still needed more bolts anyway, so. Anyways, turn in your Bibles to the book of James. Book of James. Ryan, so I'm glad you're filming these because they say it helps to film yourself and watch you, and you can learn on like your bad mannerisms and stuff, and you can work on correcting them. But if you don't watch yourself, you don't realize that. I was watching the last Sunday that I taught, and I didn't realize how much I smack my lips, and it was so. I'm like, I was doing that so much. I'm like, it's driving me crazy. Like, is this what you guys have to deal with?
Since we're saying things we don't like, you tend to sigh a lot. Sigh.
Well, if I'm teaching on something. What's a mannerism that you have?
That you don't like about Kegan.
A bad mannerism.
I don't know.
Yeah, that was the main one. Like I said, but like that's kind of expected. Like everybody says
I
a lot.
myself at times.
I do that too, and I noticed I did that. I
just noticed that.
A good way to know, I was watching a YouTube video of a girl talking about just pregnancy tips, and I put it on 2 speed because I was like, get through this faster.
Yeah.
And that was when you really noticed the ums, because it's and that was like when I was like, oh, I probably wouldn't have noticed unless I had it on that fast speed. It really sticks out. So maybe watch yourself on double speed and see.
You might find more to correct.
Really, the sighing, or is it?
Sigh.
I sigh. Well, I feel like.
Especially like if it's like a heavy subject.
I was just about to say that if it's a serious subject, I'll sigh.
Like, it's not a little sigh, it's a big sigh.
You've been waiting for an opportunity to bring this up.
Always been doing nasty comments on
Facebook Live.
All right, like I said, I didn't really have a lesson. It's just James was next in my Bible reading, so I thought we could just read through that today, or as much as we can, and I'll maybe make some comments as we go through it. Something interesting about James, I know we've talked about this before, but it is the most elementary book of the entire New Testament. It's very basic, very simple. Something I didn't know, though, they said it is almost completely void of this topic of grace. Like, it's not really mentioned. There's a couple like brief mentions, like, God resisted the proud but giveth grace to the humble. But like as a whole, like, which is so contrary to like the rest of the overall theme of the New Testament is grace. Like that's like the predominant theme pretty much. And so then you have this book and it's like almost completely void of it, which is weird. Interesting though. But it is very elementary. It's very basic. And so yeah, I think it's a great book for newer Christians to read through. Now you're gonna be.
I heard you. I was like, I'm just gonna see right.
We were talking about like bad mannerisms or things we do, and Raleigh pointed out that I sigh a lot, and so now I'm gonna be noticing it every time.
A good discussion to have after.
Yes, yeah. Anyways, and I don't know how to fix the smacking thing. It was made at the beginning of a sentence,
Some
like,
of the mic too, they have
Oh.
special mics where it helps the sound, and some of those really expensive mics help stop that.
I think it was like when I was about to say a sentence, like at the beginning of every sentence, it was like, I could hear it, and it was driving me crazy just listening to myself talk. Anyway, all right. So yeah, it's a elementary book. It's a great book for newer Christians, younger Christians to read through because it's very basic. It's got some simple things about living a Christian life, being a Christian. It's also a great book for more experienced Christians to go back and review. And so that's what we will do. We'll just start reading. If you have comments, please interrupt me. And I want a lot of participation if you just want to talk about something or...
Sorry.
So if you have any comments or anything about what we are reading, or if it just sparks something else, even off topic, and you want to bring up, this can be more of a discussion lesson as less of me teaching, more of a discussion. So we'll just start reading. And yeah, if you have any comments or anything you would like to say, please speak up. All right. Beginning in chapter 1 and verse 1 of James. James, I better put my phone on. Turn it off. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. My brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. Excuse me. But let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. Any comments so far? Yes, I knew.
Question. Was this book written to Jews or Gentiles?
So the correct title of the book is the General Epistle of James. A lot of Paul's letters were written, either to a person or a specific church. James is kind of more of it was a general letter.
That's not what verse 1 says.
Scattered to the 12 tribes. So Jews.
So we don't need to listen
Jewish
to this.
believers, I guess, anyway.
We don't need to listen to this.
Yeah, we can just throw it out with the rest of the Old Testament too.
Yeah.
That's a bastard. Any other comments, David?
No, I just think it's kind of obviously it's starting off with I don't want to say an abrasive comment, but more so like a bold kind of catch you off guard. Count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations. But then the fact that it goes into knowing this and trying your faith worketh patience, and your patience have her perfect work. And just as you read it, just kind of applying that, patience in temptations, usually we think of patience when we're waiting for something good to happen. You pray for something, then you have patience. You don't know how something's going to turn out, so you try to have patience. But the patience is doing nothing with hope, is kind of how I think of it. So patience in temptation is when you're tempted, do nothing but hope. Do nothing but think about God. Don't act on it, as the temptation's happening, use it to learn, count it all joy when you fall into temptation. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. Diverse means many.
Diverse?
Yeah.
Is various or
Various.
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 Many.
Yeah, one thing that jumped out to me is just the word let, whereas instead of a do, patience is not a doing, it's more of a letting. It's not something you have to work hard at, it's kind of more of a letting go thing. Sometimes we get too tense and like we want to do something, and sometimes God's saying, no, don't hold on, let go. Just let patience have her perfect work. It'll play out. Let me deal with this. Just let go, and I will handle it for you. Trust me. That's just, I don't know. I just like that word "let" jumped out at me.
I have a
Andy.
comment, but I'm trying to kind of workshop it in my mind. Count it all joy when you fall into dire temptations. I heard something here recently where a guy was talking about that. He's like, a lot of us think like, oh, I can handle temptation. I can handle, if I was kind of in a pressured situation to do something that's wrong. And he was talking more in the sense of with men and lust. He's like, for most men, he's like, you're not. Let's see, I'm trying to work this out. You don't. It's hard to say. You're not in a situation a lot where you are, especially as Christian men. We're not in a situation where sometimes we have all of those. We have those temptations. Sam, this isn't working out. Keep going. I'll try to work it in my mind, and I might get back.
All right, I'm trying to grasp. But yeah, we'll come back to that. All right, verse 5. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering, for he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. For let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord. Kind of interesting there too, just the God, obviously wants to give us wisdom. He truly does, and he's happy to give us wisdom. But if our faith isn't sound and solid, and we're wavering back and forth and everything, God's not going to trust us with more wisdom. If we're not using what he's already given us, the knowledge and understanding of what we do understand of the Bible, and then we're praying and asking for wisdom, he's not going to give us more. Yes, David?
I thought this would just be interesting to share. I have in verse 5 the word upbraideth highlighted. I was like, I wonder when I did that, because I don't know what that word means. So I Googled it, or actually I have the Webster dictionary out. But it says to criticize severely, find fault with, or to reproach severely, scold vehemently.
Whoa.
So I just thought it was interesting how it says,
Whoa.
if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, and God giveth to all men liberally, and doesn't criticize, he doesn't reproach, he doesn't scold. If we ask for wisdom, God's not going to be like, oh, you don't know anything, like you really are just a baby.
Not going to put you down for it, like he wants to give you wisdom.
And I think sometimes we get, whether it's, a teacher or a parent, when we're a kid, that kind of scolds more so. I think sometimes we might get that image of God where, since he is perfect, he really holds it against us when we're not perfect, but God doesn't do it. He upbraideth not, give if we ask.
There's another verse that says that he remembereth that we are but flesh. Like, he does know we're weak and that we fail. And so, he's not going to scold us when we're asking for wisdom. But a key thing, too, in asking for the wisdom is not to be wishy-washy in our faith, where we're, being tossed around. We're not solid in that. He's not going to trust us with more wisdom when we're not, living a sound, firm, faithful life for him. So, all right. Let's continue on. That was verse 7. So verse 8, a double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. Let the brother of low degree rejoice in that he is exalted, but the rich in that he is made low, because as the flower of the grass he shall pass away. For the sun is no sooner risen with a burning heat, but it withereth the grass, and the flower thereof falleth, and the grace of the fashion of it perisheth. So also shall the rich man fade away in his ways. Riches don't last forever. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, and when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. We've talked about this, I think, in our men's meeting a long time ago. This verse was brought up. Sometimes it can be easy, if we're, going through a hard time or we're facing a lot of temptations. And a lot of times we think of temptation as like something like lust, like, we're tempted with that. But like something I've been challenged with a lot lately is tempted with anger. It's like there's so many things. There's like I just am boiling inside, and it's trying to keep the rage. Keep the rage inside. So temptation can be a lot of different things, but yeah, that's one thing for me. Like whenever I heard temptation when I was younger, growing up, I was always like, tempted to do like something bad, like lustful or whatever. But that branches into a lot of things. Tempted to feel pride. If you feel good about yourself, you accomplish something, you're tempted with pride. You can get filled up with pride. So tempting can be. There's a lot of areas we might not fully grasp and associate it with temptation. But yeah, the big one for me is tempted with anger. But we have to always remember that God does not do that. So when we're going through a hard time, it can be easy to get upset, or dare I say bitter at God. I'm like, why are you allowing this to happen? Why are you tempting me with this? I can't handle this. I don't want to deal with this right now. But we always have to remember, God does not tempt us with evil. That we are tempted when we're drawn away from him through our own lust. It's our own lust that is driving us away to that. It's not God laughing and dangling all this bad stuff at you, tempting you to do this. God's he's not like that. What's the verse say, Ryan? The thoughts I have of you are not evil, but of peace, good, or something like that. I can't remember. Satan's the one that tempts us, and we are drawn away from our own lust. That is why we are tempted. Moving forward, verse 15.
So what's is there a difference like between testing and temptation?
Yeah, I'd say there is a difference. I'm not sure if if I could perfectly define that for you.
So I would say God tempted Adam and Eve, or did he test them?
I don't think that would be God. I think that would have been a case where they were drawn away of their own lust. God gave him a rule.
He put the tree there in the rules.
Yeah. He gave him a rule to follow, but he wasn't like constantly dangling an apple in front of Eve's face saying, "Are you gonna eat this? Are you gonna eat the? Come on!" Like, he wasn't the one that physically tempting her. I don't believe.
To set a rule isn't to tempt them to break the rule.
Yeah. Just setting a rule isn't. You're not trying to tempt that person to break it. Then yeah, I would agree with Andy on that. Does that answer, or is there more to that?
I think it's really hard. I never understood it, and I don't know if I ever will, but that does get confusing. I know.
What, temptation versus testing?
Just with that verse 13, God not tempting anyone, it gets hard. I mean, you can make a quick blanket statement, but I don't know. There's some tough things there.
Yeah, and maybe the key thing there would be tempted with evil. I don't think, and again, you'd have to say, well, what is the definition of evil there? I mean, God might bring things in our life to test and prove us, like how loyal we are, how faithful and trusting we are. But I don't know, to what extent does that evil mean? Is he going to be really like...
God knows us, and that whole Pharaoh thing, it does start off with God saying, hey, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart way before Moses ever shows up on the scene. God tells Moses, and that whole story, that gets tough. But God knows all things, and he knows the future, what we would do, or whether he tempts us or not, or what option we would take for the better or for the worse. But that gets really...
I got a lot of hands going up.
With some stuff there, God, and then the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's like, okay, if I create a whole bunch of little babies, I'm not going to put some hand grenades in a room and say, hey, don't touch those. I'm not perfect like God is, but I don't know. It's just a big topic there.
Because you can argue, like, wow, why did he put that tree there in the first place?
Yeah,
why couldn't he? Why did he even give them the option?
It's free will.
That carrot in front of them.
And
If it wasn't there, there would be no free will.
Yeah.
And if he backed, does he sometimes back away and let Satan step in
Yeah.
to do his dirty work, just to see whether we're gonna follow Satan or follow him?
I think he would only do that, and this is just speculation, I guess, but I think he would I think God does that sometimes, but only in two situations where we don't want God's help, so he's not gonna interfere, or he knows how close a relationship you have with him, so it's not gonna shake us, or it might shake, but it won't break the foundation.
Well, that's what he did with Job. He knew Job's integrity, and he knew that no matter what Satan did to him, he was going to, stand firm, and he still allowed it to happen. And that's actually, James literally talks about that. He's like, you have heard of Job and his faith. So like Job, it is awful what Job had to go through, but think of the probably millions of people that have studied and learned and was encouraged by reading Job. So it's like, yeah, he was going through that awful time, but like, if you were him, be like, knowing like millions of people will be encouraged by this just by me standing.
I'd raise my hand and be like, pick somebody else.
Could it be someone else?
He'd be a good example.
Andy.
You know,
Tien.
I messed
I
up.
was just the app classic.
Yeah,
Dad
class.
preached a sermon a long time ago, and I'll never forget it. But he talked about there are some times where Paul said Satan hindered me when talking about wanting to go visit these people. And then other times he said God hindered me. And then I think when talking about David, where he failed in counting his people, and God was upset about that. In one passage it talks about how like God did it, and then there's another passage that talks about Satan. And Dad's basically the summary of the lesson was it's hard to understand, but even Satan's existence is only God's gonna make it give him glory.
Yeah.
So even by Satan, the wickedness he does, God still, in a sense, uses him to bring forth, like he did with Job. Satan stepped in, but God still ended up getting glory. So I just jumped on that. It's tough, but.
Yeah, it's a tough subject. Like I said, the last lesson I taught, that saying, even the devil's God's devil. Like he can use, I think, Satan almost like and this is some scary territory, but like he can almost use Satan as a whipping method to like kind of encourage us back to him. Which I don't know. I don't want to get too deep into that because that's a tough subject, and it's difficult to understand. Andy, sorry.
I like kind of like what Jesus did. The pastor said this several times. How he used modern day situations to explain to them things, from the Bible. But to me, I think the testing and then the temptation is kind of something you can use as like, you take a test in school, the teacher gives you a test. They're not trying to tempt you to fail it. They're trying to test you to see what you know. They're not tempting you. Now, if the teacher was to come up and say like, hey, I'm going to turn my back in like 20 minutes if you wanted to sneak some of the answers from somebody else.
That's a good
that
point.
Would be temptation, but the test itself is not a temptation to cheat, but them coming up and then saying, oh, here's a good way to cheat. Well, then that would be under temptation.
That's a great point because it says he'll not tempt you with evil. So he might give a test, but his intention is for good. So he wants you to pass it. He's not intending you for evil that you'll fail.
I'd say real quick, just going along, the same thing with like a child. At some point, kids get old enough to where they have given them all the rules their whole childhood till they get to a point. And then some parents may give their children more freedom and say, hey, now you can go out and stay out later, but not past 10. But they give them a little bit more. Now, if the kid stays out and does something that's wrong, did the parent tempt them to do that? Or did you just test them to see have you paid attention to what I have taught you this whole time?
Yeah.
There we go.
Ivy and Pastor. Ivy.
I was just gonna say, it's always, whether you wanna look at it, God's allowing this. You have to remember that, like Dad said before and many other people, God always provides a way out of temptation. Even if it's a small little door you gotta crawl through, there's always a way to escape temptation. So even if you wanted, somebody did make the argument, well, God's in control of everything and he allowed this. Yeah, but ultimately you made the decision to commit to whatever it was, when God still had the exit sign glowing red that you could have ran to. So if you want to make God out to be a bad guy, there's you still, if you committed it, there was still a way out. You don't have to.
Yes.
If I give a shotgun to Kegan as a gift, and I want him to use it for hunting or personal safety or something like that, if he takes that gun and robs a bank, so there's the potential there for good
You gotta cut
or
it.
evil.
Yeah.
So, which I'm wondering what Kegan would do, but that's why I haven't given him a shotgun.
Make sure you keep the gun away from your teeth.
Yeah.
Don't make me laugh.
Good. Yeah. Great comments. You guys you're the real star of the show with this lesson. All right, we can keep moving on and continue. Verse 15. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. Do not err, my beloved brethren. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. Of his own will begat he us with the word of truth, that we should be a kind of firstfruits of his creatures. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. We're going to stop here because this is one of my favorite verses in the entire Bible. And I've said it before. I think if more people in the world would give heed to verse 19 and really work on it, there would be a whole lot less problems in the world. I'm not saying it would fix everything, but if everyone just did that verse, there would be a lot less problems. If you are swift to hear, to listen, understand, slow to speak, watch your words, so you were careful about what you said, and slow to wrath. If you did not get angry quickly, if we just, those three simple things, we would solve so many problems in the world, I personally believe. And then it follows it up with the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. I know some would disagree, but I personally don't really think there is any place for anger at all. And I'm not saying that any of us can be perfect and never get angry. It happens, but I don't think there is ever really a time for anger. I know I know Dad has talked about how jealousy is something that is always a sin for us, but it's God is the only one that can be jealous and not sin. And I think the same is with anger. I think God is the only one that can truly get angry and sin not. Because when we get angry, and I know there's a verse, be angry and sin not. I've heard people who have used that verse to justify their anger. I've actually heard many people use that verse. They quote it to say, be angry and sin not. I've heard a few different pastors say that, and it's difficult to understand exactly, but I've heard a few pastors say that verse is actually telling us not to be angry, just in kind of a roundabout way. And the wording is a little confusing, but it says, be angry and sin not, and it immediately, the same verse, like there's those two dotty things, whatever that's called. I'm not a grammar person. And then it immediately says, let not the sun go down on your wrath. So in a sense, I've heard people say what it's actually saying is you're angry, don't sin. Like, get this dealt with now before the sun goes down. Deal with it. Get control of your temper now. So it's not necessarily saying like, oh, it's okay to be angry. Just be careful you don't sin while you're angry. No, I think it's saying like, don't sin. Don't get angry. Like, deal with this now. You're like, if you're angry, you're angry. Don't. Like, deal with this immediately before the sun goes down. And the Dr. Sam Davis mentioned that too. He's like, deal with it. That it's telling us deal with it today. Like, get it fixed. Get control of your temper so that you're not sinning by being angry. So that's just my 2 cents there. Any comments, David?
Pastor's not in here anymore.
We can say what we want to say now.
I would want to hear if there's any, additional information on, just in my mind, looking at the apostles. You mentioned how God can be jealous. He said, the Bible says God is a jealous God. But when we're jealous, it's always manifested. It's almost always manifested in sin.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing with anger and wrath. In the New Testament, Jesus goes into the temple and you turn this into a den of thieves and he's flipping the tables. But, Jesus was 100% man and 100% God. He could be angry righteously.
Righteously,
but
yeah.
when you look at the apostles, was it Peter who cut the ear off? Is that? And I mean, there's no way he swung a sword at him and he didn't dodge. He's probably going for the neck.
Yeah.
You're trying to protect the Son of God, and they're trying, they're coming in to take him, and so I'm sure he gets mad, and that should be righteous anger. If I'm protecting God's Son, but that wasn't Jesus' will. So even in some situations where you could justify in our mind, I heard it said that the most, I think it's the strongest human instinct is rationalization. Like, we can rationalize anything.
Huh.
We can convince ourselves that we're angry, but it's righteous anger. But yeah, if the pastor was in here, maybe he could point to a time where, and I'm sure some of the prophets got real mad, but yeah, it's very hard for us, to walk that line. So it's
like,
best to steer clear.
and I know people say, well, we should be angry at sin. I get that. Like, we can have a hatred for sin, and it can upset us, that they're aborting babies and stuff. But I think when we get angry, like actually angry, we are losing control. And I had that lesson about in Proverbs. It talks about twice about how important it is to keep control of your spirit. When we start to lose control of ourselves, sin is there. Like, sin's just like we're like, it's almost a given. When we start to lose control of ourselves, we're gonna sin, and that's where I feel like it's hard to justify ever getting angry, because angry is us starting to lose control. When we lose our temper, we're starting to lose control. We don't have control of our emotions, our spirit. In Proverbs, it calls it the spirit. And it talks about the mighty man, who if he can keep control of his spirit, he will conquer cities and stuff. But it talks about how, I forget the opposite. It says the opposite, how weak a man is if he can't control his spirit, Andy. Oh, I thought I saw a hand somewhere.
I was just going to say, too, if they're angry, even if we are angry about abortion, if we're talking to somebody who's considering abortion, is that anger being displayed going to help them?
Yeah.
A lot of times you have to be wise about it, and even if that is something, if you think about in your own time, and, it gives you those feelings of why are people doing this, that's a lot of times not going to be used for the glory of God, to be real angry and yelling at somebody, that it's an awful thing. You kind of then have to put that in
I think, and this might be getting into territory that we're not prepared to talk about with enough wisdom, but I think a lot of times men, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here, but I think men, what? Men, I think, justify anger because they think that it will show the severity of the subject, and that's a bit tricky. And I don't want to get into that right now because I don't know if I'm wise enough to talk about that. But I think guys will use anger to prove the severity of what's happening. So, like with their kids, they think their kids aren't taking them seriously, so they blow up just screaming and yell at them to prove that this is a serious matter and that I'm angry and you don't do this. And I don't know what the answer is to that. I got a lot of hands going up. Pastor.
Dr. Sam Davis, we watch a lot of his DVDs. He says that anger is never appropriate.
Is he the one that has that long series about anger, or is that another guy?
Yeah, he does. And I don't know. I know that verse, the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God.
Just read that.
But I know because Jenny told me. And sometimes Jenny makes me angry. But, that verse that Jesus said he looked on them in anger. He didn't say anything or, yell or scream, because sometimes, he communicated his anger with his look. My mom could do that really good.
Not to praise man or anything.
But so I'm just saying sometimes, and I don't even think my wife agrees with me on that, but I think that there can be certain situations. I mean, you don't say, now, sweetheart, honey, little toddler, don't play out there. The semis are coming by. maybe the tone of your voice get a little bit angry,
Stern.
to sternness, to show. If you keep doing that, you're going to become road putty. And just talk really sweet and kind, they're not going to maybe get the message as you, But if you do it all the time, it wouldn't be good, because if there is a fight or flight situation and you scream at him, oh, well, Dad does this all the time, then would maybe jump out of the way.
Empty threats. Very dangerous for parents to make threats that you can't or won't follow through with.
Rip your head off.
Yeah, if a parent says that all the time, then when they do make a real threat, the child's not going to take them seriously. Real quick, I just want to say one thing I will compliment Casey on is I was talking to Sean today and I asked them if he had ever yelled or blew up screaming. They said that they cannot recall ever. Joy isn't. I didn't ask him about Joy, but to Casey's credit, they said no, they have never seen Casey blow up.
I could say the same thing.
But kind of like.
They're not laughing with me, they're laughing at me.
But kind of like what you were saying, Shonda said there's a look. And she said when he gives them that look, she's like, I start shaking, it scares me. I was like, whoa. I was like, they know, no, what we're doing is, we have to stop immediately. But they said he's never blown up yelling at them. I was like, wow, that's impressive.
Super quick. Well-known Christian family, I won't give the name, but they always talked to a lot of kids. They always said that their mom got quieter when she was upset with them. And they said it's something like that. It's patterns that kids will notice of, oh, we need to stop what we're doing. Mom's getting quiet, saying, you guys need to stop that. And then that's, or, mom's disappointed with what we're doing or something. So there's different ways. And yeah, so for Sean and they've learned to recognize that look of, okay, stop what we're doing. Without getting the brain.
Without it getting to that extreme,
Yeah.
It's the King family. I think you're talking.
I think Ryan and
A lot of kids.
there were more hands.
Andy, we can skip over what I was going to say.
I was gonna piggyback off Ivy with she's pregnant, but I got a call this weekend and I answered it and I was like, oh, and it was somebody and they're like, oh, we're with, and I didn't hear what they said. And trying to get the vote for a certain judge or whatever. And I was there, I'm like, who are you with? And they're like, oh, we're with Planned Parenthood. And I remember, he started, he went on talking, and I was there, and I was like, I'm gonna just let him have it for even calling me. And I was there, I'm like, it's not gonna do anything to yell at him. And so I let him finish, and I said, I'm like, I don't believe in murdering babies, and that's what I think abortion is, so no thank you. And I hung up. I did feel anger when I got there. Once he said that, I was like, you calling me from an organization that aborts children. But I tempered myself and I was like, it's not going to do it. If I just start screaming, that's not going to show, Christ to them. Obviously, you may not know as Christian or whatever. But in that sense, afterwards, I did feel angry. And I don't feel guilt in feeling anger because, Ivy had mentioned, somebody who's considering an abortion, you don't want to just be screaming at them. Because that's not going to show them the love of Christ, and they're going through difficulty. But then on the opposite end, the people that are performing that and that are pushing people to kill their own children, I didn't see that as a slightly righteous anger, but not in the sense of, oh, now I'm justified to just start screaming and yelling at these people. I had anger, but then I just was able to state, and this is my belief, that is, I believe that's killing children, so no thank you, I'm good, and I just hung up after that. But I don't know if maybe I'm wrong in that it's that might be a situation where it is a little bit of righteous anger, but without the just wrath and the getting in a debated argument,
Yeah. While you were saying that, it just made me think of, God's a God of love and he's a God of anger. He does get angry. But us, we're commanded to show forth the love of Christ. We're never told to show the love of God or the anger of God to others. So that's not our job, is to be just to convey or be conduits of God's anger. We're the chosen ones to be the conduits and to enforce God's anger.
Same side, some people oh well, we need to show love towards everyone. in essence, I'm like, do I sit here and be like, oh, I just love these people. I'm going to show God's love to the people that are committing the murder. That's where I was like, I did feel anger, but I'm like, obviously, I already said my point. But
Any more before we move on? Okay. Ryan?
I will say it, you talked me into it. That yelling and everything is so true, and I know back when I was in the construction world, I didn't swear, so nobody, it's like, in today's world, you gotta use several explicatives and some swear words to get other people to show them that you're serious, or that you're upset about something that went wrong on the job. And that seems to be the world today, unless you break out several swear words, 5, 6, 8 in a row, and just be screaming and your face all red, people don't take you serious. When I say, oh, shucks, why did you do that, they just don't take me serious.
And that can be difficult, because if you don't act like them, they'll walk all over you, and then it's interesting you brought up the tongue, because James does talk a lot about the tongue, and we'll get into that a little bit. But let's continue reading. Actually, we're out of time.
That's right.
I was gonna read through the entire book of James. Juan, go ahead.
I think a lot of it is that it's two reasons. People are vulnerable, and people are jealous at the same time. Because when you're vulnerable, you see a lot of bad people. They thrive on attention, and that's why they get tattoos and they go to jail and they do all these things, or because they're from a broken home, because they want that attention. But then the people that are trying to be godly, they're jealous of the fact that these people that aren't godly are getting all these things because they're doing whatever it takes for the devil to give them these things, that it's kind of on that path where it's like you have to choose. And sometimes it's hard.
Yeah, jealousy, anger, a lot of those emotions are kind of envy, like they can intertwine a bit, and one can cause the other can cause the one, and it's something that we always got to be careful of.
So like you said,
mindful.
With the whole kid situation or people in general, when you're a Christian trying to get your point across, it's hard to not, sin or not sin, because, you're torn in between the fact that it's like, you don't want to be the bad guy, but then you want to be a good guy. And it's like, and then on top of that, God is telling you to stay on the straight path.
If I could just piggyback on that, it's like kind of what you were saying, Kegan, of those jealousy, envy, anger, they kind of intertwine.
There you go.
Kegan mentioned that. I think that's a good point, because like we have, as humans and as Christians who are trying to, let God perfect us, there's so much we have to work on. And you hear this lesson on anger, and it's all about anger, and then you hear one about this, but the devil will put us in situations and he'll tug on a little bit of everything, because it's a lot easier if a little bit of anger, a little bit of jealousy, and things work together. But especially with those, the main problem is that we're looking at other people, and our focus isn't on God and how He's working through us, and how we need to just be a good example of living, the Christian life, and we're focusing on what other people have. And I think it's whenever we start getting getting angry at other people's sins, I think it can be a problem that we're not focused on God, and we're sitting here pointing fingers.
Yeah, and people are watching, and we have to be careful of our testimony. We're out of time, and like I said, I was planning on reading through the entire book, so I feel bad because I had a lot of things I wanted to say. But if I guess to end this, give you a last thought, real quickly go to chapter 3, verse 2, and we'll just read a little bit, because I did want to touch on what Ryan talked about, the tongue. Chapter 3, verse 2 says, For in many things we offer all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. If you can control your tongue and what you say, if you're strong enough to do that, you can control your entire body, because that's the hardest thing. Behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. For time's sake, we're going to skip a little bit. Go to 5. Even so, the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue amongst our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire of hell.
Powerful.
Yeah, powerful stuff about our tongue and how the effectiveness, the damage that just our words can cause. Read 8 and we'll be done. But the tongue can no man tame, and it is a unruly evil, full of deadly poison. I just to end this, I know we're out of time. We really gotta, but whatever. But I saw a quote the other day, and it was quite profound, and I've been thinking a lot about it. So I figured I would read it for you guys. Going along with this idea of anger, we talked about anger, and our tongue, how damaging and hurtful our words can be. I don't know who said this, but I just read the quote. It says, 1,000 apologies cannot rewrite a single moment. That's a lot to think about. It goes on to say, but a single decision can redefine the rest of your life. The power of a moment, what's done, what's said, no matter how many times, that person may end up forgiving you, but you can't take it back. You know, what was said or what was done. So just be very mindful and careful. If you let anger, jealousy, envy, any of these emotions get the better of you, just always remember, like, what you do, what you say can never be taken back. And they may forgive you and down the road, but it still happened, and you can never rewrite what happened. So keep that in mind. What you say and do has lifelong impact and it will have lifelong impact. And so remember the power of a single moment. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for today.